Hi everybody, welcome to a new week. Now, I was hoping I was going to share last night's footage with you today, but here's something I learned last night. If you're going to record a talk at YF, you need to make sure the microphone's connected to the camera. We had footage, but we had no sound. So apologies if you weren't there last night. You won't get the full footage, but I'm going to do my best to summarize what we thought about together last night. So consider this your kind of youth fellowship match of the day. But last night, it wasn't me speaking, it was Kirsty. And Kirsty was sharing with us about Babel, stop two in our journey through the Bible. We began week one with Eden, then we moved to last night to the place of Babel in the book of Genesis. So here's what Kirsty shared with us. At Eden, we saw how everything was good. We saw the perfection of God's creation in Genesis 1 to 2. But we also thought about how that perfection didn't last very long because sin came into the world when Adam and Eve chose to disobey God. And then Genesis 3 to 10, well, we shared how that's been described as a kind of house of horrors as things just get worse and worse. In those few chapters, if you read through them, you see separation from God. You see sinners acting like victims and shifting the blame to others. You see family breakdown and you see the increase of violence. In just a few chapters of the book of Genesis, we move from something so good to something so bad. And last night, well, we stopped at Babel, which we read about in Genesis chapter 11. And at Babel, we kind of see everything bad come to a climax in what happened there. So let's see what happened. As we come to Genesis chapter 11, Christopher Ashe says this. He says this carefully constructed passage begins with one language and ends with confused languages. It begins with one group of people and it ends with a scattered rabble. Have you ever heard someone use the phrase, you're speaking my language now? When we say something like that, what we're really saying is, hey, you think the same way as I do. We're kind of on a similar level here. It shows that we understand each other, that there's some sort of togetherness and unity. Humans, as we come to Babel, well, they may not have had harmony with God outside of Eden. They might not even have had a harmony with each other, as we saw violence increase and their relationships break down, but they still had lots in common. They had this shared understanding. And we read about that in Genesis 11. We discover that they had this one shared idea. And here's what that idea was. Genesis 11 tells us that they said to themselves, come, let's build a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens. Now, as we look at that, we might kind of think to ourselves, hey, that's really good. They want to build a tower that connects them more with God so that they can worship Him and they can fix that broken relationship. But unfortunately, we shouldn't speak too soon because as we read on, well, we find out what they actually wanted to build that tower for. That verse finishes with these words, so that we may make a name for ourselves. It's pretty clear that these people in Babel, well, they're not hoping for a better relationship with God. They're not trying to deepen their connection. These people are consumed with themselves. God isn't present in their aim or their desires. They're aiming at becoming great themselves. In Babylon, a few centuries later, they had a tradition of building these things called ziggurats. At least I think that's how you say it. And these were temples built up flights of stairs as high as their technology would allow them to build. And with the house of God at the very top, nearest to the heavens. The whole idea was that if they could reach the gods, well then they could be like gods themselves. These towers, they show this idea of self-rule and reign. It shows us the hearts of people. They want it to be like God. They wanted to be in charge. They wanted to live as if they didn't need the one true God. People wanted to live their own way, and they believed the lie that they could do a better job themselves. Desmond Alexander, he says this, what we have here is an account in which all the God-given abilities of human beings are deliberately focused on creating a society where God is redundant. The inhabitants of this human city view the Creator as irrelevant. So here we are in Babel. The people have this common idea, and it's not a good one. They want to build this great tower so that they can become like God themselves. They're probably feeling quite proud of themselves, quite proud of their achievements and their engineering talents. But in verse 5, well, we see how God responds to their idea. And as we read this, well, there's a little bit of irony going on. They think they're going to build this huge tower that's going to connect them with God, and verse 5 tells us this. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. The author here, well, he's kind of mocking this tower and the people that are building it, because he tells us that God had to come down to get a closer look. We get this picture of it being so far away from reaching heaven that God can't even see it. It's just like a tiny dot to him. And so he has to come down for a closer look. Now, of course, we know that God can see everything, everywhere, all the time. But the author's trying to help us to see that the great efforts of the people, well, they were nothing compared to the majesty of God. Humans can't come close to God's greatness, and we're fooling ourselves if we think that we can do a good job in life without him. In verse 6, well, we see God's response as he sees this tower that the people are building, and here's what he says. Nothing that they propose to do will be impossible to them. Now, as you read that, it may seem as if God is feeling threatened, but we shouldn't be fooled. God is the Lord of all creation, and nothing can stand against him. God is all-knowing, and he's wise beyond what we can even begin to comprehend. It's not that God's worried about these people in the sense that they're going to become like him. No, God's worried because he knows the devastating consequences that sin has upon his people. He knows that their rebellion will cause them so much harm. And so, in his love and his mercy, God confuses their language and scatters them across the earth. This scattering across the earth, well, it's the opposite of what the people wanted. They thought that being together in this city with this great tower would bring them security, and so they wanted to stay in one place. But the problem with that was that it was complete opposition to God's command. Do you remember what God said in the very beginning? He wanted human beings to fill the earth and to subdue it. So by trying to stay in one place, well, it's another sign of their rebellion against God. Christopher Ash says the harmony of voices singing together in tune is replaced by a horrible raucous noise, each trying to shout louder in its own language with its own agenda. The orchestra have deposed the conductor, and each is playing just what he or she feels like playing. What a picture this is of our world today, where everybody just wants to do what feels best for them. But the issue is that when everyone does what they feel is right, well, we'll never have harmony, as everyone has different standards and beliefs to live by. When we all try to do what we want to do, well, the result is a chaotic and a divided world. And Proverbs 14 reminds us of this. It says in verse 12, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. As we make this stop in Babel and as we look around at what the people are up to, well, it gives us a picture of ourselves and our very own society. People nowadays, well, we might have literally given up building towers to reach the heavens, but it just seems to be in our human nature that we want to build a name for ourselves. We want to be the best. We want to live life our way, and we want to do it without God. And so the great lesson that we learn here as we move from Eden to Babel is that unless God remakes this broken world, well, this world cannot really be healed. We can't heal it ourselves, even though we might try really hard. The truth is that without God, well, we're destined to experience the consequences of our sin. However, God in his kindness restrains evil. The forces that fracture the world are not given unlimited sway. The good news is that God is working even in the brokenness. He has a plan to remake all that has been ruined by sin, and the church is part of that plan. We have in our DNA as Christians the DNA of a remade world. We have Christ within us. In response to the sin of pride at Babel, God divided languages and divided nations. But Jesus came and now calls us to take what is divided and to bring it back together. Jesus, when he sent out the disciples, he said, "Go in my name to make disciples of all nations." We can see Jesus beginning to bring people back together. And the one thing that we have in common is that we belong to him. We are part of that family of God. As Christians, no matter how diverse we are, no matter where we live, spread across the world, all of us serve the same God. As Christians, we're not united by what we like, by our culture, by our language, or even by how we read and interpret the Bible, but we are united in Jesus. We're united to glorify Christ and to allow him to be the love and ruler of our lives. So let's begin to tear down the towers that we've built for ourselves, and let's put our trust in Jesus. I really hope that you've got a taste of what we studied together last night, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you online next Sunday for our first missionary focus of the year. So we'll see you online next Sunday. Have a good week.